Today we're going to learn about variables. Within the Python context. Python has no command to declare a variable, so you have to declare the variable yourself. Second of all, that a variable creates a moment for you to assign a value to it, and then that value gets stored, and you can call that value or recall that value anytime you want. We normally use variables when we actually want to calculate things, or we use it in effectively applying it to formulae. Now I'm going to jump straight into the lesson. So first of all, if I look at a variable and I want to call the variable, and I'm going to, for purposes of this exercise, I want to call one variable x, and it's an uppercase X, and I'm going to call it any. And then the next variable, I'm going to call x lowercase, and I'm going to call it and give it a value of 12. So if I want to recall that value and I go uppercase, it will return the value of any. Let's see. There you go. And then if I go lowercase, it will return the value of 12. So the first principle that's important is that Python is case sensitive. If you write a variable and you misspell it, it will regard it as another variable. Now let me show you an example like that. So I'm going to go with price, and price is 12, and then I'm going to go price, and I missed the L, and I'm going to go and call it 10. You will see that it will return the value of 12 because it is that value. It's assigned to price. So it will regard the misspelling as a different variable. So sometimes when you struggle to debug your code, you must also check that you've used your variables consistently, and that you have not misspelled them. That is a critical component. Second of all, what I want to do is say I can assign different data types to variables. So first I want to go and use x again, and I'm going to give it a whole number value. Then I'm going to go and use x again, and I'm going to give it a real time or a real value. Then thirdly, I'm going to actually assign it a text value or a string. So all three are the same variable that changes properties, and the last one would be the one that if I print it now, it would print the last value that was assigned to it. So it's important to note that whatever you've done before, if you reassign a value to that variable, it will take on the new properties. So it would be, you will see that it is now any. But in the instance where, I'm going to move it and say, if I print it at that point, at line number 3, it will look at what was assigned to it beforehand and utilize that. So it should give me the real value, which is 12.23. So that's maybe the first thing that is, or the second thing that is important. Thirdly, I can reassign values to a I can change values into different data types. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a data type. So let's call it price, and I want to call it a string. Now, if I run this and I want to print it, now the REPR command, what it effectively does is it displays for you on the screen what the value really is, if there are any special characters attached to it. So now I'm going to print price, and what you would notice, and I'll show you now, is that there are inverted commas attached to it. So that means that this value is actually a string. It's not a numerical value. If I want to make it a numerical value, I have to now convert it. So I'm going to go and convert the value. So I'm going to go price equals, I'm reassigning it a value. I'm saying I can assign it a real value. So a real value is called float, and I'm going to say the real number is price. And now you would see something interesting. If I run the program, I must just remember to print it again. I must print it twice. If I run the program, you would notice that the first value was a string. The second one is now a real value. Now, if I convert it again, and I want to actually convert it into a whole number, let's see if it can do that. And it should give me an error. I'm going to print it again. It gives me an error. I must just remember to. Okay, there you go. Now I'm going to print it again. And see, it converts it for me into a whole number, and it loses the decimal. So that's a next principle. So you can change the value by just converting it to a different kind. I can then take that and I can convert that number again. I can convert price, which is now a whole number, into a string again, which is then back to what it was. But what you would notice now is that it lost that original number. Because, and I'll show you now. So what happened was, first, price was a text number. Then I converted into a real number. Then I converted into a whole number. Then I converted it back into text. Now it lost the decimal. And what I'm converting back into text is the last value that price was. So that is quite an important principle too. Can give you lots of errors if you do not understand that. I think if I want to find out, and maybe I should not have deleted that, if I want to find out what price is, or what type of value it is, I can actually test for it. I can type in type, and I can type in type here, and I can type in type there, and it will return the data type that it would be. So first you could see, first class was string, the 12.39. Then I converted it to float, and then it will tell me that the second one is float. Then I converted price into a whole number, which is an integer. That's what the int stands for. And then you would see that it returns back that that class is an int by using that type command. And then thirdly, I converted it back into a string, and then it got that. Now you would go, where would I use this? It is quite important when we read documents that we can convert from one data type to another, and first of all test whether we've got a valid data type before we perform a calculation. So somewhere down the line, when we deal with variables in terms of assigning values to them, multiple values to them, and getting output values, you would see how we use testing first for the data class, find out whether there's an error. So for instance, if I want to do a calculation, what I want to do first is test whether I've got the right data type. So I can actually test first of all if the data type is an actual fact a float. And if it's not a float, I can either return an error value or try to convert it. And then once I've converted it, I can then do the calculation, or again, I can return an error value. So that is that is quite important. Now I'm going to go into a more important aspect of variables, which is a global variable. So what we want to do is sometimes we would write subprograms, but we want to declare this a global program. We want to use the same variable everywhere. So a subprogram is normally defined by definition, and I'm going to go my proc, and I'm going to write a subprogram, and it will be print x. And then I'm going to go and write another subprogram, def your proc, your program, and that's just my own name that I've given to it. And I'm going to also print x. What you would notice, and when I run this, and I'm going to go and now call the two programs, my proc, and I'm going to call your proc. And at the top, I'm going to declare x as 100. Both cases, it should return 100. Let's see if it does that. Both cases, so that means that this variable is a global variable. It can be used by all subprograms. Now, if I, for instance, do not declare it as that, and I go and I declare it within program as 100, and here I declare it as 120, then it would return two different values for me. So when I want to utilize, and why do we do that? Let's say, for instance, I build a program that my program must calculate x, but x is 100 times y, and in the second one, x is 120 times y. Now I want to give a constant value to y. So I'm going to give it a value of 10. Now I'm going to run it. And what you're going to see is that y would have the same value both times, and x would actually have a variable value, a different value in each program. So because x is then a variable declared for my proc and a variable declared for your proc. They're not the same variable, they're different variables. Where y is a global variable which would be applied, would have the same value in any program that it uses. So that's quite an important concept. And we use that concept quite a lot when we do different types of calculations. We can also use global keywords, which is also in effect a global variable. So I can go and I'm going to go and I say name equals any, and everywhere when I print name, I want to go y, x. I'm just going to replicate the code. you will see that it replicates the names. It will use the I want to go change that to name. It will be a global keyword that I would be able to use. And I'm going to run it again. And you will see that both would have any there as a global keyword. I don't have to declare it in every program. I can declare it once and then use it everywhere. So that brings us to the end of this lesson. I'm going to move on to the next lesson, which would deal with data types.